Okay, good evening, guys. Ricardo, Rawan, I see you guys here. Rawan, how are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing good. Thanks and yourself.
Yes, thanks. It's nice to hear you say good morning. Is it, how's the weather doing in New Zealand?
It's okay. It's been raining the last 2 days, but it's been quite nice.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, similarly, where I am in Cape Town at the moment, it's also raining. So, yeah, it's
Yeah, I found that
part
New
of the
Zealand
southern,
and Cape Town have the same weather.
yes, southern hemisphere winter season currently. All right. I trust that we will be having more people joining us shortly. But welcome from my side to tonight's lecture, advanced level lecture, whereby we are looking at flank openings, particular reference to Rieti and the English opening. It's a bit of a strange topic because often you find coaches, they teach their students about controlling the center, and then the coaches tell the students you need to develop your bishop towards the center, coupled along with the other pieces. So why are you choosing to develop your bishop um, as a flank opening? Why are you choosing to develop your bishop to the longest diagonal? Whereas if your bishop is developed to the center, you are controlling more than one diagonal. The direction of the bishop, it covers a larger area. And that is often the question that we ask. But it is very similar to a driver. When you start driving, you stick to the basics, and as you become a more refined driver, you start developing other types of habits, and you try different things and whatever. Yeah, you even become a bit deviant at times. But be that as it may, we will be looking at the flank openings tonight. Certainly, there's a different approach to this type of game. If you choose this type of opening, your strategy is completely different. It is less attacking, less adventurous than the normal openings that we are familiar with. However, we still need to consider these openings. Most of the time, it ends up becoming very much a positional type of game. So some of the theory or concepts that we will be looking at is the close relation between Rieti, the Rieti opening, as well as the English opening. You'll see there are very much there are some similarities. It is just one or two different variations. With the Rieti opening, it will start off with knight f3 as the first move, and the second move being g3. Whereas the English opening will open up with c4. uh, Black will respond with e6 as one of the variations, and then the English opening also tends to play the g3 move. We will also look at the double fianchetto bishop system, whereby both bishops gets developed to the flank. There will also be some games where only one of the bishops gets developed to the flank. The double fianchetto bishop that we'll be looking at is particularly relevant for white, developing the bishops to g2 as well as to b2. And in some cases, black only responds with one or two of the bishops also being developed accordingly. Then we will also reflect on typical ideas and model games for these openings. There's also just a note, if you look at the attachment that I'm sharing, a note that I actually just made for the student is that often it is more important, other than learning specific variations, it is more important that we ensure that we understand the typical middle game positions that we can come across, because there are scenarios such as the fianchetto bishop that we have to contend with. There are scenarios like the isolated pawn. There are positional scenarios that we also need to take into account. But you can only overcome these challenges if you are familiar with the correct plans related to the various openings and the variations accordingly. Okay, so that's just part of the challenges. We say welcome to Jiran as well for having joined us. So having said that, I also want to repeat that it is an engaging session. It is not just me having a monologue from my side. So we will be interacting as usual. All right. So there are a couple of games, at least 5 games that I want to reflect on for tonight. The first game is by the master himself, Yeti, who introduced the Yeti Opening. It is a game that was played in 1924. So I will make some comments about the game later on. But this game particularly emphasizes the double bishop fianchetto system. And you'll actually see my note at the bottom that the basic idea of the Yeti Opening is the fianchetto of the king's bishop. Knight f3, black responds with d5, and white plays g3. The basic idea of the Yeti consists of creating peace pressure against the center, so that white often tries to fianchetto both bishops. So in this game, you'll actually see how both bishops actually pressurize the center. And it is quite a thrilling game, but I'm going to leave that for you guys to judge for yourself. Okay, so white started off with knight f3. It's a game where Yeti played against a guy with the surname of Yates. Black responded with d5. I'm just going to go very briefly. C4 is typically played in order to just try and get rid of that center pawn from black, because white is selfish. White is the only one that wants to control the center. And so it's very much almost like a Sicilian in reverse, that idea of the c5 move that black normally plays in the Sicilian. So white comes up with a c4 move there. I'm just rolling forward, and here we can already see the first step to fianchetto that bishop. G3 is played, knight f6, and immediately bishop g2. Look at the bishop going to d6. Right, black is almost out of an option. You might ask yourself, is that the right square to go to d6? Why not go to c4, c5? But the problem is that he's going to lose a tempo, because white will immediately respond with d5, with d4. But whereas d6 at the moment, he's immediately cut off by the g3 pawn. So is that the correct diagonal for him to go to? My response at this stage would be that black plays d6 because he wants to later on focus on pushing the pawn to e5, and then he needs that bishop support on d6. All right, but black's options are actually limited. The very next move for white, you see that b3 not only supports the pawn on c4, but there are already plans underfoot to fianchetto the bishop onto b2. Okay, I'm just rolling forward, castling. That's just pretty straightforward there. There's just a patient build-up, but at this stage, look at what's happening on black side. His queen side is completely dormant. Okay, those pieces are fast asleep. So let's see for how long that is going to be the case. Okay, at this stage, black is just adopting a wait and see attitude. Right, we got used to the knight d7 move with queen's pawn openings. Okay, very interesting, knight going to d2 instead of c3. Can anybody tell me why white is choosing to play the knight to d2 instead of c3? What is his thinking? Any comment from your side?
Has it anything to do with him trying to play E5?
Yes.
E4, I mean, not E5, E4.
E4, yes. Specifically, also, the idea, Rawan, is to keep that diagonal open. All right, and we're going to actually
Okay.
see in a few moves' time why he adopted that strategy. Okay, but thanks for that. Here, black goes E5, which I actually predicted. I just want to see there's a comment in the chat there. Okay, Ricardo saying E4 for sure. Okay, thanks for that, Ricardo. So immediately after E5, white simplifies. Okay, so by simplifying that, he's immediately opening up, and he's actually stating his intention to take control of that of the C file. All right, taking advantage of the fact that black is actually lagging in his development, especially on the queen side. Okay, so after c takes d5, here we go. Rook to c1, knight f8. Okay, freeing the diagonal for the bishop, but also with the opportunity, giving himself the option of going to e6 or g6 with the knight. I would want to think that he'd want to go to g6 more, because he'd want to keep the e file open for the advance of the e pawn. Now, I'm going to close the moves. White has played a strange move, rook c2. What do you think? What's his intention? What would white want to do with his next move? What is his plan that he got? Can I call on Jiran to give us an answer there?
You want to play queen a1?
Queen?
Queen a1.
Very good. Okay. So, like I said earlier, there is that plan of keeping that diagonal open. Excellent. All right. Let's just roll forward. There we go. Well done, Jiran. Knight goes to g6. So now you guys can see how black is actually defending on the e5 square. All right, so he's got 1, 2, oops, that wasn't supposed to be an arrow. It was intended as a circle. So you got the knight, the bishop, and the rook all, and there's a lot of focus on e5. So you got three defenders, whereas white has got 1, 2, and 3 attackers. So there's a lot of focus on that dark square diagonal there. So let's see. Rook c2 also gave you the option for doubling up of the rooks. Okay. Bishop c6, also trying to be proactive and to defend the threat of the long diagonal being controlled by the bishop on g2, and also cutting off the rook. Let's just roll forward. Knight f1. Shall we say that the intention is to go to e3? Or what do you guys think? Any other strategy that you would like to adopt there? I'm just skeptical of why he plays knight f1, because now surely e4, then he's taking away some of the defense of the e4 square. Do you guys think that was a good idea to play knight f1? Any comment? Shall I call on Charlton? Any comment from your side about the knight f1 move? Okay, anybody else? All right, I'm going to roll forward. See, you guys are still waking up now. Okay, there goes knight e3. But now you're having the e pawn here still stuck as a backward pawn on e2. But there is that option of the knight now having more options to go to f5 later, or also threatening the d5 square. But let's see what happens. Bit of a weakish move by black to h6. And now, what should black do? Should black be exchanging? Takuchwa, what should black do now that white has played d4? Good evening to you.
I don't think black should be exchanging. I think black must play e4.
Okay, so if black plays e4, I'm going to invite a response for white's move after black plays e4. So then the knight is definitely under attack. Takutsu is right. I would agree that play e4 because it will shut off the bishop and the queen that is wanting to attack on that diagonal. What should white be responding if black plays e4?
Knight e5.
Knight e5. Is that what you said, Ricardo?
Yes,
All
yes.
right, thanks. Okay, let's see how you guys, if you guys are correct. And there we go. Well done to both of you. Knight e5. Okay. Could be a bit of a crazy idea. Could be a bit of a risk because now white's gonna give himself a double pawn. But he definitely had a plan. Okay, so because of the fork involved there and that knight being on a very strong outpost there, the bishop is kind of almost forced to get rid of that knight. Here's the exchange. Knight gets chased away. Now look at where these pieces end up on. I want you to see now the location of white's attack. He's attacking king side, but he's also got these rooks. He's also got a plan B lined up here on the queen side. Okay, just look at what I'm showing you guys. All right, whereas that rook is still sleeping there on a8, and look where those knights are. Okay, h7 and g6, not the ideal position for the knights to really be dominating the board. Okay, they are just attacking the area immediately around them, so there's no real center control at this stage for black. I still say that white has a clear advantage, and there we go, f4, supporting that double pawn. White is also conscious of the fact that black can en passant. Okay, he can take it, but he'd actually be doing white a favor by getting rid of the double pawn. So let's see. Yeah, and there we go. Okay, so that pawn on f3 can still go to f4. Okay, any comments or at this stage before I continue? Anybody want to say anything or so? Is the strategy clear at this stage? I'm going to get to the exciting part still. So at this stage, I just wanted to just cut in and see if you guys have any comments.
I just wanted to say, for after that en passant, black actually has the worst pawn structure than white because black has the isolated d pawn.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that is the reason why white invited that exchange there on e5. Also, Rawan and others, what I want you to notice is the fact that this bishop and the queen, they are still very much alive on that long diagonal, because you see what I'm pointing at? Look out for e6 advance sooner or later. And then you still got that strong diagonal. You can even push it now and take on g7 if he wants to. So he's got that options, and then he's messing up white's pawn, black's kingside pawn structure completely. Okay. So let's just roll forward and see. Okay, there that knight tries to get into a better position, g5. Where is that knight heading to?
It's heading to e4.
It's,
One says e4, another one?
what isn't that like h6? So what's that? h3.
E6. Oh, okay. It's also attacking h3, yes. Another square, shall we say e6 is also consideration to block that pawn there?
Yep.
Right. Okay, so let's see how it goes. f4, gaining a tempo, attacking the knight and connecting. Beautiful pawn chain that's happening there now. And yeah, h3 is the idea, inviting the exchange of the g2 bishop. White is not falling for that, because black was hoping that white exchanges his bishop, and then he can then activate the bishop on c6 by pushing d4 afterwards, and then that bishop will have a strong line of attack there. Okay, as I said, d4 is going to come. It's a bit of a sacrifice of a pawn, but I want you guys to see that pawn sacrifice. It's almost forced because of the fact that prior to the sacrifice, look at white's position compared to black's position. There's no activity. So that pawn sacrifice was actually to start some activity for black. All right, because his pieces were useless. There's only the knight on h3 now that is kind of active in white's half of the board, but the rest of the pieces are just, they're like just standing there. Okay, it's like you're playing ball, but you're not getting any of the ball being passed to you. All right, so you're basically a spectator. So there, thank you very much for that pawn. And the mistake that that black actually does is that by white taking the pawn on d4, suddenly there's also another open file. Okay, one of these rooks can come across to d1. Okay, then he will be completely dominant with controlling both files in the center and that long diagonal. All right, so let's see. Rook comes to d8. Okay, so there's an attack on d4, developing, gaining a tempo. But what do you guys think about that sacrifice there? It's an exchange sacrifice. Why? What is the plan, or what is White's thinking? I'm going to ask Tiziano. I see Tiziano's also here. Tiziano, good evening to you. Can you tell me what is the thought behind rook takes c6? Will you play such a move?
So can I answer?
Yeah?
Because you're eliminating the white square bishop from the
Yes.
diagonal. And if
Correct.
he takes with the pawn, and if he takes with the pawn, you can just take with the bishop back.
Very good. So you're saying takes, and then the pawn takes, and then the bishop takes. Okay, well done, Geran. Excellent. Okay, so there was a very useful tactic. Even if the bishop on g2 was unable to take, suddenly you see two isolated pawns. Okay, so he was completely damaging the queen side. But basically, white has now actually gained the pawn, and he is surely going to lose his bishop again. Okay, so it's basically gaining a pawn, and he's actually cementing his dominance in terms of the pawn structure. If you look at it in terms of the, okay, there's something in the chat there. The Kutswa is asking that Charlton and Ricardo please type in the chat your full names, surname, and Leech's usernames. Okay, at this stage, the Kutswa, I would recognize it as Ricardo, as Charlton Mniasta and Tiziano Mniasta. Okay, but you guys in the chat, can you just type accede to that request, please? Because the Kutswa is doing the attendance for Cape Town Chess Academy. Thank you. All right, so just coming back, I want you to say, I was about to say now, in terms of your pawn structures, look at your pawn island. You've got only 2 pawn islands, and there's a very strong pawn chain going there, and even on the queen side, there are 2 connected pawns. Okay, so there was some tactical vision there from white, and let's see what happened from here on in. Okay, the Kutswa Ricardo has typed in the chat their message. Okay, so now black comes up and he goes knight f2. Okay, white is not afraid of that check. And queen takes d4, so that was also a bit of a response from black to get rid of the 1 bishop. Takes, and the rook takes, and then the bishop takes on e8. Okay, with this position, I'm just going to roll back with black's next move. Obviously, he has to move back his knight. Okay, now I'm going to ask, what suggestion is there for white's next move? Anybody?
Rook c8.
No, man.
Let's see. Who said
Rook
rook c8?
Rook.
Takut.
Oh, Takutswa said rook c8. Chiran, are you saying rook c4?
No,
rook
Rowan.
c8.
Oh,
Rook
Rawan's
c8,
saying
yeah.
rook c4. Okay, anybody else?
What about bishop c6? Let me see the white bishop. Oh,
Okay, bishop
Another.
c6. I'm hearing that. I'm looking for another one.
Rook
Neither of the
c8.
three of you are correct so far. Those are candidate moves, but I want definitive moves. I want your priority moves. Pardon?
E6.
Who's
E6.
that? Who's that saying e6? Let's see.
Zara.
Jiran saying e6. Jiran, talk to us. Why are you suggesting e6?
Because if he takes with the pawn, then he loses the knight.
Very good. So it's a deflection that we are looking at, and the knight will be hanging. Okay, well done, Jiran. That is the correct move. And if the knight now suddenly moves away, you see there is also an attack on f7. Okay, well done. There's also the option now of the knight going to f5 then. All right, so e6, a splendid move. There's an intimate check there. So now the king just goes to e3. Okay, black is running out of ideas here. And at this stage, yes, that's when black resigned. Okay, after king f3, black resigned because it was a completely lost cause. All right, before I ask for comments, so we were talking about the flank openings tonight. We're looking especially at the similarities between the Yeti and the English opening. So having looked at this game, I just want to make some remarks on the move order for the Yeti. We said that it will be knight f3, black plays d5, white plays c4. And then you'll see that after the c6 move, d3, knight f6, bishop b2, bishop g4. You guys can picture that, okay? It is harder for white to fianchetto the king's bishop if black had played an early e6, all right? But if b3 is played early enough, then it actually leads to a line of the English opening, okay, that you guys must just need to understand that. So the Grandmaster Yusupov, to meet the Yeti opening, he actually recommends a solid system with the development of the queen's bishop, the bishop on c1, to go to g4. All right, so he's actually recommending knight f3, d5, g3, c6, and then on the third move, white plays bishop to g4. Okay, so then you will see that white has two ways in which he can act in the center. All right, he can play the king. You can actually try different things there, but there is still a complete advantage for white. Okay, any comments regarding this game from you guys? Any comments? Or questions from your side?
When was this game played?
It was played in 1924. Okay, Yeti opening, the opening, the person playing white, Yeti himself, he introduced this opening. Okay.
Was both these players grandmasters that time?
Yes, yeah, they were both grandmasters, yes. Okay, the next game is a game that was played between former world champions Garry Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov. Okay, so it is a game that was played. Is it 1979? I just want to double check on scroll down here. 1987. Okay, so in this game we actually see that there are basic ideas attached to this game, which we will highlight later on. Okay, it's English opening, and now I want you to see the similarities between the two. Okay, so just rolling forward there. Okay, can you actually see at this stage, if you compare the Yeti that we looked at, compare this current opening with the English opening. Okay, once again, there's a double fianchetto bishop, and early g3 and b3 being played. Okay, let's just for going forward, bishop e7. Now compare the bishop going to e7 now to the previous game where we had the bishop going to d6. Okay, and I spoke about that in the previous game. So there's a clear difference there. Once again, you see white having the advantage. Notice how white is actually delaying the bishop going to b2. Okay. So basically at this stage, nothing in the game. Compare the structure to the previous game. As I said, somewhere along the line, they end up with the same structure. It's just that the moves get reversed. Your strategy is basically the same. All right, once again, knight to d7. And white is not in a hurry to get that knight to c3. So finally he gets it there. Previous game, the knight went to d2. Okay, I'd say the main reason why he goes knight c3 at this stage for this game is because of the bishop being on e7 and not on d6. So remember earlier, the bishop went to d6 because of the focus on the e5 square. Okay, so you had that attention going there. All right. Black inviting an exchange, and the knight immediately goes to e2. Okay. Why play a5? Anybody would say that is, in my book, I would say that is a bit of a prophylactic move. Why do you think that a5 is played? What would the strategy be? Any comment?
Would there be an idea to play a4 and try and break up the queenside structure?
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. Any other comment?
Bishop a6.
You'd want to go bishop a6, yes. And would you also say that you'd want to stop possible b4 advance as a long term, because white might want to try and focus on the queen side? So let's see what happens. And also, before I continue, I want you to look at the c5 square. Look at the options that black has for that knight, either of the two knights to go to c5. There's also the bishop that can come there. Okay, the bishop won't be that much of a threat because of the e3 pawn, and white can still play d4. But certainly the c5 is inviting attention there. Okay. White is actually taking it very slowly, playing d3 instead of d4, and to chase away that knight there. Remember also, when we talk exchanges, if it's not every exchange is a forced exchange. So the bishop on f6, if white had to exchange the bishop, you would allow black the advantage of controlling the dark squares, and that is the reason why white chose not to exchange. And there is still that threat. And then furthermore, the knight on e4 still needs to also retreat. Okay, so let's see. Knight goes to d6 with the option of bringing the knight on d7 to e6 to f6. Okay. It's also very important when we are playing queen's pawn, either as white or black. Players, you need to remember, you need to calculate your central pawn exchanges very carefully. On the one hand, you could end up having an isolated pawn, and on the other hand, you do not also want to allow your opponent having too much of a pawn majority. Okay? So when I'm talking about that, compare the 2 pawns on the queen side for white to the 3 pawns for black. Whereas if you look at white on the queens, from the D pawn onwards, he's got 5 pawns controlling from D to H, as opposed to the 4. So basically, white has got both his central pawns going at the moment, and that is very, very, very important when you calculate the exchanges and what tactic you can arrive at. Furthermore, tell me, why do you think white initiated this exchange? Why did he start with this C takes D5 exchange?
Because then the c-file can be open for the rooks.
Excellent. You'd want to get the C file open, or even if it's a semi-open file, but at least there's some activity for you. Okay? All of the minor pieces have been developed, so we need to start finding correct positions, tactical positions for the rooks as well. Okay, and there comes D4, which I spoke about earlier. And that mainly is to stop the C5 threat, whether it is the knight or the pawn going to C5. Okay, so black tries to get rid of that threat there, inviting the exchange. Right, once again, it's not a forced exchange. So black now, he's stuck with a backward pawn on B6, and he has to now wait. Okay, that C file was open, but look how black is quickly in a hurry to get to the C file. Okay, white still hasn't done anything about going rook C1. He's rather focusing on getting the bishop. Okay, now very interesting, guys. Let's see how the game works out. But what you're now having is a situation of both bishop pair for black is off the board. Okay, most of the time we are told hold on to your bishop pair. So why is Karpov now getting rid of his bishops? Okay, so now we see Kasparov having just the one bishop and the knight. So let's see what happens there. What shall we say? Who's better off, white or black, with that position?
Yeah, white is better.
White.
White is certainly better off because of the fact it's got the bishop-knight combination, and the bishop is controlling a very strong diagonal. And positionally, he's controlling the center as well. Okay, that rook there still has to become very active. So let's see, even after the exchange of d4, c5, this queen then also becomes alive. Okay, so there the rook goes. Now it looks kind of even up. Very interesting move b4. Why do you guys think b4 is played? What's the tactic?
Isn't white trying to attack? Well, firstly, mess up black's queenside structure, as
Yes.
well as if black exchanges the pawns, he'll have a weak b pawn at the end of the line. So. Okay,
excellent, Rawan. All right, that's exactly that. That b6 pawn is still a backward pawn, so he's stuck at he's still stuck there. So to mess up the structure, yes, they will have one pawn each, but that pawn is actually going to become very much a weak point. Okay. So there's the exchange, and now with queen a7 for black, the queen had some beautiful direction to go to here. So now the queen is being forced to come this side, and white just simply plays a3. All right, so now the queen is becoming a spectator on the queen side. Okay, so taking it from there, suddenly look at that diagonal there now. Okay, and look at what options. All right. If there's an isolated pawn, there's a backward pawn. Those are weak pawns. So focus on the weaknesses. Build your plans around the weaknesses on the board. And that, guys, is exactly what black is now subjected to. White moves his rook to to b1. He's got the b1 rook as well as the queen on b4. now launching this powerful attack. Also notice the possibility of rooks being exchanged on the D file. Okay. Coming back there, and now the rook could have gone to C1 to pin the knight first, but now immediately inviting that exchange. Very interesting move from white. Okay, why H6? Anybody? Sorry, breathing space? By breathing space, are you saying to, just in case there's the back rank threat?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and suddenly there's the pin, there's an increase. Okay, interestingly, notice now, guys, black can actually take there if he wants to, eh? Because he will also be attacking the queen, but then you've got the rook aspect. So that is actually, it's going to be a blunder if you should do that. Okay, here's just a bit of patience and some, I would call it slow poison by Kasparov. He's just been building up slowly and strangling Karpov. Okay, the knight cannot take on A4 because of the pin. Look at that beautiful square for the knight on E5. Why is white now actually giving him that pawn on A4? Any comment?
Because if queen takes A4, then black just loses his B6 pawn also.
Very good. Okay. I also want to add to that comment and say that, yes, if the queen takes on the B pawn, but what white has now successfully done is that he has now actually drawn black's pieces to the queen side. Okay, so white is now ready to start his next plan attacking on the king side, and white's pieces are more ready to do that than black. All right, if the queen takes on B6, he's immediately having an attack on double attack on C5, and he's attacking on D6. Although the knights can be coupled, but it won't be successfully defended then. All right, so let's see. Okay, talk to me about that threat now. Any comment? In my book, I think that is the winning move. Queen to D1, any comment? To Kuchwa?
Yeah, because if you protect the C8 knight with a queen, then you just lose the A4 knight.
Yes, correct. But what if the queen goes to A8? Then she's protecting both.
No,
A8,
then
you just take it with the bishop.
Oh, sorry. Yes. My apologies there. The queen cannot go to A8. Queen goes to A6 to protect both. And then? You guys see that? Is the plan really going to be that effective? That's my question.
But can't you, even if he goes to queen, a6, you still go queen b8 check, and you can try and take the f7 pawn with the knight, and you're threatening queen h8, and or even bishop e4.
Very good, Rawan. That's what I actually want to do here. The d8 queen still goes there. You're going to check the king, chase him into h7, and then you're going to get the the f7 pawn. Okay, so that was part of the idea. On the one hand, it is to attack both knights. So there's the tactic of overloading. The queen is doing too much work. She has to defend both knights, but there's that pawn that's going to fall on f7. All right, and that's what I was referring to earlier, guys, when I said that white is now ready to launch his plan B to start attacking on the king side, because he has drawn all of black's pieces over to the queen side. Okay, and those pieces are actually nowhere near to white's king. Remember, in chess, we need to focus on attacking the king. So there we go. King comes back. Black was kind of forced to come knight e7 so that he can have at least have some type of defense. But now the f7 pawn still falls. Okay, it's a pity now that the king is going to escape on g6, because it would have been a checkmate move. Okay, so let's see after that. Now the knight actually blocks an escape square for the king, but the knight is protecting the h8 square. So black is kind of forced to be doing that. There's also now the attack on the f7 knight by the queen. Right, double threat, attacking the knight on a4 and also the e6 pawn. Okay, how much longer, the question is, how much longer is black going to be able to defend? Now I want you guys to if you look at this position, I want you to tell me what is the other possible threat that white can come up with based on this position. What other move can he also make?
Bishop e4.
Very good. Bishop e4, definitely on the card, so that we can have the pin there. You move the knight away. You can maybe even bring the knight to e5 afterwards, and then you're going to basically be knocking black out completely. Okay, so let's see. Forcing the exchange of queens. No, we don't take queens. Okay, the attacking knight falls, but there bishop e4. All right, comes in. King comes back, and look at the slow strangle that's happening here. Okay, attacking weaknesses, and there's nothing that black can actually do. It's going to be senseless trying to hold on to that weak pawn there. So suddenly there's one pawn advantage, but also now the next thing is we've got that weak pawn on e6, and then there's a strong diagonal also happening that's being controlled by white. I'm just rolling forward, and this was a world championship match that was happening. Okay, watch the g6 move as well. That pawn is also now extremely weak. Black's running out of moves. Importantly for every, yes?
Is that the last game that they played?
No. Yeah, it was game, I think it was game 27, yes.
Yeah, Karpov needs to draw.
Yes, Karpov needed to draw, but unfortunately, that's when Kasparov beat him, yes. You're absolutely correct. He needed just a draw to retain his title. Okay, so here you guys can see this patience here from white, and that's key. Patience in every aspect of your game, every phase of the game. You need to be patient and not rush your moves. Just going forward. And there, targeting weaknesses, isolated pawn, and that knight now is tied down to defending there. Okay, it looks like black wants a draw there, so white just changes now position. Okay, you're asking why, you're wondering why is this happening? Forcing now the exchange of queens, but Black realizes it's too late. He cannot exchange queens. Look how that pawn advances. Okay. And I think with that move, surely you can say Black has to resign, because the threat is the f7 square, eh? And then he's actually going to be, Black is going to be losing his knight. So let's see. Still goes to f7. And now the bishop is heading to attack a different diagonal. Weakness there, inviting the defense there, and then there's also the other weakness of g6. So if you guys probably know, we've spoken the past few weeks about the principle of two weaknesses, focusing on that. Right, Black, if you want to, you can take my bishop. What are you going to do? Black says, no, I cannot take your bishop. It is too dangerous. And this is where Black resigned after the king went to g2. Okay, there's absolutely nothing that he could do about it. All right, I just want to just refer to some of the aspects that we've been looking at now so far. We looked at both the fianchetto of both bishops. We looked at attacking and controlling the center via our bishops. But now, interestingly, with the next game, we're going to look at a situation where the player chooses to retain his knight over the bishop. Okay, so this is a game that was played in 1992. It is a rapid game played in Germany, but I just want to also just illustrate some strategic ideas here, similar to what we've been doing so far. That opening that you guys can see is very much the same as what we had in the Karpov-Kasparov game. Okay, both bishops being fianchettoed by white. Black chooses only to fianchetto the one bishop. Okay, so I'm just rolling forward here. I know many of our players now, they would choose to want to play an early d4. We are reluctant to play d3, but the strategy is keeping the diagonal open for that bishop on b2 to attack on f6. Okay, once again, d3 being played as opposed to d4. The knight on c6 has to cover e5. All right, otherwise it's going to be very strong. White will have the option of going with the knight or the bishop on e5. Interesting, knight c3, as in the previous game, knight going to c3, not d2, but there's the choice. I can go b5 or I can go e4. Okay. So I'm just rolling forward until we get to a certain position. I want you guys to see, once again, in the previous game we saw a5 being played. Now you see a4 being played. Why would white choose to play a4? Anybody? Why would white choose to play a4?
Play bishop a3.
Bishop a3, yes. Anything? What was white trying to prevent?
b5.
Very good. Okay, so b5 b5 was the threat there. Okay. Now I want you to see that for the Yeti opening, even for black as defending, they will try to play b4, b5. Okay. And they will try mainly to create space. Okay, with the Yeti opening or with the English opening, a lot of the activity initially happens on the queen side, and the b5 becomes a critical part of the strategy for either white or black to try and control. The game so far that we've been seeing, in fact, all of these games, white ends up winning because white is taking advantage of the fact that he can develop effectively. He positions his pieces and he can get first option to attack, and that is quite important. Okay, so in the English structures, we see that white holds back his control pawn, his central pawns, and basically white is relying on pressurizing the central light squares with his pieces from a distance. So that's what we saw in the game so far, and we're once again seeing it in this current game as well. Okay, and that's the idea behind fianchetting both of the bishops. Like I said, the b pawn advances is to try and create space and to open files along which to infiltrate black's positions, and white has been doing that very effectively so far. And once white has broken through on the queen side, he's frequently able to switch his attack. Remember I spoke earlier about the plan A and plan B. Then he went across, he drew black's pieces to defending on the queen side, and then he went and he launched some activity on the king side. Okay, and also exploiting weaknesses which is created by black, because black ends up maneuvering his kingside pawns very poorly. Okay, and he does that because black is desperately trying for some counterplay. Okay, black must try and get some counterplay on the king side with these openings, but it is not so straightforward. Okay, on the other hand, it's not going to help black if he just merely sits still passively and waits to see what white is going to be doing. All right. Similarly, in all of your games, players, you must try not to give your opponent too free a hand. You must not allow your opponent to be dominating you for most of the game. All right, any comments on what I'm saying so far before I continue? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's good advice.
All right, so I'm just fast forwarding. Interesting that black exchanges the bishop on g2, and then the queen takes back. So now knight goes c6, obviously targeting that the outpost on b4. Wow, that's all I can say is wow. What do you guys think about the g4 move? Would you guys have had the courage to play that move at this early stage of the game?
Yes.
Okay, I have some brave person saying yes. Okay.
I would not have.
Yeah, no, I agree, because you haven't finished your development here. What I'm showing you, there's a knight on e1. You don't know if that knight, you've just moved that knight earlier from f3. Okay, you don't know if that knight is going to go back there. You got this bishop that is hidden behind the knight on c3. Yes, you got this rook that you can do a rook lift, switch him across like that, what I'm showing you. But you got your king here on g1. Why open up the windows and the doors so early in the game? Okay, am I making sense? But I'd say that white is doing that because he wants to maintain the advantage looking at the position with each and every move players, you need to do a CCT process, checks, captures, threats. So you look evaluating strengths and weaknesses in your own position and in the opponent's position. So now if you're playing white, white is now ready to do that because he feels that he's got some defense going. The bishop that was on b7 was probably the most strongest attacking piece, and that bishop is now no longer there. And look at what I'm showing you. Those pieces from black, they are not really posing any threats at this stage. In fact, the rook is fast asleep on f8. Okay, and that is the reason why I think it was Gerard that says that he will do that. Okay. I said earlier, knight will probably go to b4. So we now suddenly have two attackers on the d3 square. Okay, let's see what the response is. Keep up the tempo. We play g4. You don't attack and run away. Stick to your plan. Okay? And now, talk to me about the knight going to e8. What is black's major problem going to be throughout this game now?
His rook on f8.
Absolutely. That rook might as well be removed from the board. That rook is dead and buried. Okay? If you are equal in pieces, but your rooks, your bishops, your knights are inactive, they are useless. You might as well say it's -5 points, -3 points. Okay, they are useless to you. So let's see. The knight on b4 went to go and attack the d3 square. Okay, I showed you there's two attackers and only one defender. White's last move, knight e4, is completely ignoring the pawn that is being attacked. In fact, you guys are going to see that white is going to be leaking pawns. Not only one, he might end up giving off 2 pawns. What is his plan? Why does he choose not to defend d3? Why does he choose to play knight e4? All right. I need a comment. You need to tell me, if you're playing white, what is your strategy going to be, looking at the current position?
You want to play knight f6 check.
Okay.
Or queen c2 if knight takes d3.
Or queen c2 if he plays knight d3. Okay, Jiran, I'm going to go with your first one. Okay, and I'm going to give you a gold star for that. Knight f6, definite threat. Remember, guys, we just spoke about the rook on f8 that is dead and buried. So he wants to make the sacrifice. Should the g pawn take back on on f6? Remember, we got the queen on the g file. You guys see that? So there's definitely an exchange sacrifice coming. All right, so let's see how it works out. Okay, thank you very much. I'm taking the pawn and I'm also attacking your bishop on b2. Exchange, rook exchange, and here we go. White does not waste any time. So let's see what happens. Should he take? What do you guys say? If you're playing black, what will your response be?
He must take.
With what?
With the bishop.
Take with the bishop. Anybody else? What should he
He
take
must
with?
He must take with the bishop and play g6. But we'll
Okay, take with the bishop and play g6. Yes, anybody else?
If I were to take, I'd take with the knight, not the bishop. Oh, no, you have to take with the bishop. But I'd rather just try and move the king.
Okay, remember the knight is critical to defending g7, eh?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, but
so
I'd just move the king.
Right. Okay. It's just Chiran and Rawan that is contributing tonight. Where are the others? Tiziana, Charlton, you guys are quiet on me. Okay, and G6. Very good. Okay, so now you got to try, and if you're playing white, you need a new strategy. You need to try and get in, somehow get in there on the H6 square. Okay, interestingly, look at that bishop, defending the F6 pawn. There's the second pawn also being sacrificed. At this stage, guys, look at white's strategy. All right, he's focused on, he made the exchange sacrifice. White is almost like he's lost his head. Look at his pawn structure here. Not a single good pawn. He's 2 pawns down. Black has got all his pawns connected. And look at this here. Would you not be worried if you're playing white? You'll be sweating. I hope my plan works. Okay. So there's definitely white needs to keep his head together. But look at that move now. Bishop e5. Okay, black must play. What do you suggest? What is black's next move going to be?
Black needs to play rook takes e5. Give the exchange.
Okay, why?
Because if he moves his queen back, then this queen c5.
Correct. Yes. Okay. He needs to play that. Very good, Jiran. Queen g5 going to h6. This bishop now he's got a very, very strong outpost. This rook is now cut off. He cannot come back to defend. Okay, so black actually ends up taking the bishop. All right, and so that the queen can now also get the pawn. So he's prepared 5 points or 4 points because he was already the exchange up. So he gave the exchange back. Okay, now he's 3 pawns ahead. But let's see. Inviting the exchange queen. There's only one piece now that is working hard for black, and that is the queen. All right, and that is the ridiculous position that black found himself in. So now after h4, are we going to go queen g5? Queen f4, still threatening the g5, the h6 possibility. Okay, forcing exchanges. And now, look at that. There's that pin going. And the pawns we're going to get back at the pawns that we are behind with. Okay? Once again, let me remind you, what is the main root of black's problem for this entire game? The rook on f8. Never part of the game, not able to attack, unable to defend. And now, furthermore, he's being pinned. All right. So there we go. We got 1 pawn back, another pawn flies, and whoa, suddenly we're having a pass pawn. Okay, so exchanging. I'm just rolling forward. At this stage, white could even have gone to a7, threatening the rook takes knight, but if the king takes, the king would have been in time to stop the pawn there. Okay, so rather not take that chance. Let's keep the game simple. More pawns about to fall, and the king now centralizes. This is just basic endgame stuff. That's how I'm rolling forward. Okay, and look how far the white king has traveled. Okay, and after that, there goes All right. Any comments, guys, about this game? Here you saw inactivity happening. You also saw the pawn storm coming up with some clear strategy. And once again, you saw the power of the rooks controlling files there. And clearly, white had a much better strategy compared to black. Any comments?
Yeah,
Black.
white can play A7.
Yeah. He can play A7 now and go for his queen and checkmate, yes. All right. I'm moving over to the next game. Okay. This is a game played in 1983 between Anderson and Van der Wiel. So the comment that I'm making here is that this game provides an example of a knight proving to be superior to a bishop. The knight does not have a strong protected outpost in the center, and nor is the position closed. So instead, you guys will see that the knight proves strong because it has weak pawns to attack, and those pawns are on squares of the opposite color from the enemy bishop. One of the problems with the bishop is that it only controls squares of the same color. All right. It doesn't control squares of the opposite color, whereas the knight can control squares can attack squares of any color. So basically, you need both of your bishops to work in tandem, or you need to ensure that the bishop that you're left with, that bishop is controlling the pawns that are on the same color squares as the color bishop that you have. Okay. So having said that, let's just start off with the game. We're still on to the flank openings. So this one you guys can see clearly it is the English opening because the c4 move comes much sooner. Just rolling forward. I just by the way want to comment that the c4, the English opening move that I'm playing, whether it is c4, I've just been focusing on English opening tonight where the bishop is fianchettoed. You do also get the English opening where white chooses not to fianchetto his bishop. Okay, so the bishop does not go to g2 or to b2. So I've just been focusing on games to show you the similarities between the English and the Yeti, namely what strategy to adopt with these flank openings. Okay, so we're just fast forwarding, and there you guys can see the typical English opening setup with d4 being played. Very interesting because up till now we've been looking at games with d3. Okay, I just want to come back to the previous move from black, knight h6. It's a bit of a risky move. Okay, it's not usually played to that square, but the comment that I'm making is that this unusual development of the knight, it is largely played to prevent white from playing d4. So black wants to keep his bishop attacking the d4 square. Okay, but as the game shows, white is able to make this advance anyway because the knight on h6 becomes very vulnerable. It is limited to its activity. Remember, the knight on the flank is only controlling 4 squares, whereas as opposed to the 8 squares if it is developed to the center. Okay, so the more natural development of the knight would have been to f6. So that's just a comment that I wanted to make at this stage. So I'm just rolling forward quickly. Immediately the bishop gets rid of the knight on h6. Very interesting. Why get rid of the knight that is now misplaced? Okay, it's supposed to be useless there. They say the knight on the rim is grim. So why get rid of the knight? Extremely interesting so far. But let's just look at what white does. Giving the pawn away, but there's definitely a reason for that. Okay, I'm going to pause right here, and now you need to tell me, was it a good idea for white to give off that pawn, considering the black's pawn structure on the queen side? Any comment?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely, because now you guys can see that white clearly has a plan that he can work to. Okay, your plan, your game plan, guys, are based upon the weaknesses in the position. All right, and you plan accordingly because you target weaknesses. Up till now, there wasn't, up till a few moves ago, there wasn't very much of a plan. So even if black exchanges queens here now, white still can target these pawns, the weak pawns on the queen side. And you guys can actually see that the c5 pawn is going to fall. It's going to have very great difficulty in defending that. That bishop cannot come here at the moment to defend it. Okay, so the c5 pawn is going to fall, and then another pawn is going to fall. All right. So let's see how the knight dominates over this bishop. Okay. White didn't want to exchange. Is it a good idea of black to try and force the exchange of queens there? It's still opening stage. Is it a good idea for black? I need a comment. What do you guys say? Should white take now? Should he accept the offer? And is it a good idea?
I don't think it's a good idea because it will get Black's bishop into the game.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find a move for white. I'm thinking about like queen e4.
Okay, any other comment? Thanks, Rawan.
I would like to trade queens here and go knight e4. Looks very tempting.
Okay, I agree. All right, another comment?
I also think it's okay for white to exchange.
Okay.
Because
All right.
his pawn structure is good.
Okay, thank you for that, Kutswa. Yes, white has got a superior pawn structure to black. So yeah, I would go along with the exchange. And you guys will actually see the fact that, like I pointed out, that there's a weak queenside pawn structure. And we're also going to look at the fact that the c6 pawn is backward, but c5 is bound to fall immediately. Okay? Calculated, if we exchange on d2 now, bishop takes, knight goes to e4. The only way, so there's a fork of the c5 pawn as well as the bishop. Only other move to defend the pawn would be b4, but then a3 is going to follow. You guys see that? All right, and then your knight suddenly becomes extremely active. Okay? So we actually see that the last few moves have also had the effect of exchanging some of white's the remaining bishop for its opposite number, and thereby it deprived black of the bishop pair. So that's what we saw happening there. All right, and now black starts feeling uncomfortable. Okay, because later on we will see the advance of the b4 pawn happening, and there will be positional advantages for white. Okay. He will also succeed in opening up the b file for his rook. All All right, so let's just roll forward. Exchanges, and there we go, knight e4 as we predicted. Queenside castle, interesting, but it is more to activate the queen rook as well. The c5 pawn is going to fall. You do not take it immediately, but rather gain a tempo. Okay, so that if the bishop moves away, you can also simplify the game and exchange. All right, there the pawn falls. Coming back immediately, the rook is shut off on the d file. Okay, so suddenly now the bishop is a bit more active on that long diagonal. Keeping it straightforward, you can also expect that b4 is going to happen. There we go. Okay, so it looks like black is getting back into the game. But look at that move now. Sticking to what I spoke about earlier, we are targeting weaknesses. All right, and definitely c6 pawn now against the king. Okay. This is not a threat at this stage here. The knight is completely dominant and it is protecting the b4 square. So black needs to defend. Very interesting why choose to exchange there, but it is so that the knight could also go to b4, and once again there's an attack going on c6. Okay, sorry, what did I do now? Just need to, I just want to go forward quickly. Sorry about that, I pressed the wrong key here. Okay, so the knight, we stopped with the knight coming to b4. I'm just fast forwarding there. That pawn was doomed to fall. It's exactly what I was saying, guys, that weak pawn structures, you know, if there are weaknesses, you need to ensure that you exchange properly, that you avoid these weak pawn structures, especially with these type of openings, because the games are very much positional. It is very much strategic. It is not so risky, but it is like, you know, you slowly get poisoned, slowly get strangled. It's like a slow poison, as they say, that's happening to you all the time. Okay, so you need to ensure that you avoid these weak pawns. And at this stage, black resigned. Okay, there's the pass pawn. White is completely dominant, and if you look at this king, that is also centralized with the pawns here on the king side. Okay, I just want to come back. We had one more game to do, but time is going to catch us. Any comment on this game, guys? Anybody?
I would say that that c pawn, if like black castle king side, I think that both that c pawns would have fall.
Yeah.
Even yeah, I think that c pawn, both c pawns was lost there for black.
I agree. Any other comment?
They were black played queen d2. He wanted
Yes.
to force the exchange, but he was supposed to keep his queen and just castle.
Okay. All right. I think also if we look at it, if we look at the game itself, the knight going to f6, that early exchange of the bishop over the knight, and that meant also that the bishop ended up on h6. So you guys will actually see that that bishop initially also then became off center or offside for that matter. I think the entire strategy then, with regard to how do you dominate from there if your pieces are developed out of position, that's a huge challenge for black. Okay. Also the exchange of white and causing those weaknesses, the C pawn weakness, etc. That in itself, is key. So that's the reason why white actually made that sacrifice. Guys, there's no time to do the final game, but I just want to wrap up between the flank openings. What we saw tonight is the bishops combining forces and targeting the center. It's the central diagonals. You need to also look at how you develop your rooks effectively and getting in there early, dominating, controlling the central files. And then also the key was the pawn structures that are highlighted. Okay, we've also tried to do justice by comparing the knight over the bishop and in the last game, so that you can actually see how you can also come up with a different type of strategy. All right. Definitely flank openings, it's not intended for everybody. Everybody has their own unique playing style. But I just want to repeat my earlier point. Don't focus so much on the variations, but try to understand the reason why you are playing a certain opening and try to understand the key ideas behind those openings. All right, from my side, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to having you join us again next week. The topic for next week will be counterplay. All right, and I think you guys will look forward to that. Pardon?
Who will be coaching next week?
It will possibly be Dr. Shabir Bawadin up next week. All right. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andrew.
Have a good evening further. Okay, Rawan. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andrew. Bye.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.